I'm Jon Keller. Tonight on Greater Boston, 4 more people dead today after the latest in America's epidemic of mass shootings, this time at a bank in Kentucky. What can we do to keep this from happening, and what will it take to get local and national leaders to take action? Then later, the future of sports betting in this state as the flood of ads for Celtics, Bruins, and other wagers keep coming, but state officials shutting down requests for marathon bets, at least this year. Another mass shooting in America. 4 innocent people murdered, just going about their lives. This time, a gunman armed with an AR-15 style rifle opened fire at the Old National Bank in Louisville, Kentucky, wounding 9 people, some critically, with 4 confirmed dead so far. The shooter also dead, and police say he had a connection to the bank, possibly a former employee. Officials haven't yet confirmed the identities of the victims, but the governor of Kentucky says he lost personal friends in the shooting.
This is awful. I have a very close friend that didn't make it today. And I have another close friend who didn't either, and one who's at the hospital that I hope is going to make it through.
Those 4 victims joined dozens of others, 80 in total, who've died in 15 mass killings so far this year alone, according to a database maintained by Northeastern University, the Associated Press, and USA Today. That includes the 3 9-year-old students and 3 staff members murdered at an elementary school in Nashville, Tennessee, less than 2 weeks ago. The shooter in that case was also armed with an automatic rifle. That horrific shooting prompted 3 Democratic state lawmakers to organize a protest at the state legislature calling for stronger gun control measures. But instead of debating their message, Republicans in the legislature voted to expel 2 of the 3 Democratic lawmakers instead. Well, let's try to make some sense of all this with our guest, Jon Rosenthal, the co-founder of the advocacy group Stop Handgun Violence. And Jon, thanks for being here. I guess you were just here 11 days ago. When will this all end?
I wish I knew, but I think the straightest line is to vote the 10 to 15 Republicans out of the U.S. Congress who are holding up the will of hundreds of millions of Americans who have been polled and want universal background checks on all gun sales before anyone can buy a gun. And 70% of gun owners even want a ban on military-style assault weapons, specifically designed to do what they did in Kentucky and Nashville and the daily mass shootings, which is outgun police who carry 13 to 17 rounds without having to reload, while Congress gives 35 to 100-round magazines to kill police and kill as many people as possible without having to reload.
Well,
the solution's easy. It's the political will among the Republicans that is killing our children at the rate of more kids are killed by firearms than any other cause in America.
Well, I want to dig down a little deeper into the politics in a moment, but in the weeks since the Nashville school massacre, we've seen 8 mass shootings, 7 killed, 38 wounded. In both Nashville and Louisville, as we just heard, the state's governor knew some of the victims personally. They were personal friends. We've seen this before. The 2011 shooting of Gabby Giffords, a congresswoman from Arizona, and the 2017 attack on Republican Congressman Steve Scalise. Does it make any difference when the victims are people that our elected officials know?
Apparently not. There's been a mass shooting of 4 more people every single day for the last 3 years. When Nashville happened, there had already been 89 school shootings, more than days of this year. We are killing our future generations because of one reason only. The Republican Party is more concerned about blood money campaign contributions from the uniquely unregulated gun industry than they care about our families and our children and our neighbors. What's it going to take when 441 people were shot in Las Vegas at a country music festival and nothing changed? So, 13 more people shot today, 6, in Nashville. Every 30 minutes, a kid is shot. Every 3 hours, a kid dies in America. Congress wants to act, but it's just 10 to 15 Republicans that are holding it up.
Well, now, after the Uvalde massacre last year, 15 Republicans did vote for a bill with bipartisan sponsorship that extended some curbs on gun purchases and promoted red flag laws. No assault weapons ban, no raised age limit for assault weapon purchases, but it was something. Was that bipartisan vote just a fig leaf, a flash in the pan?
It was a start, but it was the first gun bill that had passed the U.S. Congress in 30 years. I mean, what we need to do is exactly what Massachusetts has done. And I'm a gun owner. There's no inconvenience to law-abiding gun owners in accessing firearms. But we treat firearms like inherently dangerous products, like automobiles. We require renewable licensing. We require safety features. And we give police chiefs discretion because they know the people in their communities with renewable licensing. And we ban the large capacity ammunition magazines designed to outgun police officers. We have reduced the rate of gun deaths by 40% since 1994. We have the lowest gun death rate in the nation without banning anything other than assault weapons and cheap handguns without safety features. And if every single state had the same low gun death rate as Massachusetts, the majority of gun deaths would be prevented without banning firearms.
Well, now, we're talking with Jon Rosenthal, a gun control activist for many, many years here in the Boston area and nationally. Jon, you mentioned the political and financial clout of the gun industry. Certainly, the NRA, the National Rifle Association, is synonymous with the gun lobby. I think that's what most people think of when they hear that term. But they're down to their lowest membership levels in more than a decade. They're millions of dollars in the red. They're saddled with all sorts of lawsuits. So who's driving the bus, if not them?
It's the far-right Republicans that, frankly, who are funded by the unregulated gun industry, who cannot be sued. Unlike toy guns and teddy bears and every other consumer product, there are federal standards, safety features for consumers, so that you prevent, gun injuries and deaths, or injuries and deaths from those consumer products. Toy guns, teddy bears, and every other product. Real guns are exempt from the National Consumer Product Safety Commission. When you go out and hunt, you got to have a hunting license. And when you hunt deer, you're limited to 5 rounds. When you hunt duck, you're limited to 3 rounds to protect the duck and deer population. When you want to buy military-style assault weapons or easily concealed handguns, no license required and no limit on the number of rounds to kill humans. It is extreme. And it's the epitome of bad public policy. And it's so anti-democratic, John, because, the majority of Americans, including gun owners, want reasonable restrictions like every other country has, every other developed nation. I mean, we have more gun injuries and deaths than 26 industrialized nations combined. The majority of Americans want it. The majority of Congress wants it. There's a handful of people holding it up. We got to vote them out of office. And until we do, we are going to lose another 110 people tomorrow from gun violence every day.
If the Democrats held the White House and had control of the House and had a filibuster-proof majority in the Senate, the 60-vote supermajority, would this change overnight or not?
I think you would the filibuster is a big issue. I think it's going to be very hard to find 60 votes to ban assault weapons, even among Democrats. So nothing's going to change overnight. I mean, more Americans have been killed from firearms, since 75 than all U.S. servicemen and women killed in all foreign wars combined. It's going to take time, but the start would be simply, replicating the effect of Massachusetts gun laws. Look, every single state that has background checks or a ban on assault weapons have lower gun death rates than every single state that has lax gun laws. We know the solutions. It's the political will that we don't have, and children are paying the price at the rate of 9 every single day. I mean, when Congress doesn't care about the fact that the leading cause of death in America among children are firearms, we're in trouble. And John, we're facing virtually a civil war, and in this country. And firearms are a major wedge issue. And it makes no sense to provide unrestricted access to guns without background checks or giving criminals higher power weapons than police carry, unless the goal is to increase gun violence, increase gun sales, and as a result, we lose 45,000 Americans a year, and it's going to take years to change.
John, I'm out of time, but real quickly, are you optimistic?
The only thing I'm optimistic about is Gen Z, millennials. They know how badly our generation has acted such that these kids are not safe in schools. I think kids should walk out every week at the same time because, frankly, they are not safe in schools just like we are not safe in any public place as a result of a handful of Republicans who need to be thrown out of office and replaced with young Gen Z candidates.
John Rosenthal, co-founder, Stop Handgun Violence. Sorry to see you under these circumstances, but thanks for your time.
Thanks for asking me back.
Exactly 1 month ago today, sports betting went live here in Massachusetts. And it's been hard to miss the deluge of commercials, billboards, and online ads we've been seeing ever since. Every major sports event, and some not so major ones, is open for wagering in almost every conceivable way, with well-known athletes and broadcasters fueling the non-stop hype. But there is one major competition you won't be able to bet on this year: the Boston Marathon. Late last week, the State Gaming Commission denied a request from DraftKings Sportsbook to open up betting on the race, citing, quote, insufficient time for the Boston Athletic Association to coordinate and fully ensure proper protocols are in place, end quote. So what does that say about the breakneck pace of the sports betting rollout? And is the State Gaming Commission's rejection of it a sign of regulatory tightening? Here to discuss that, our internationally known gaming industry expert, Father Richard McGowan, an associate professor of finance at Boston College, and Chelsea Turner, Chief of Operations at the Mass Council on Gaming and Health, a nonprofit government-funded agency that's been working to mitigate gambling-related problems here for decades. Welcome to both of you.
Great to be with you, John.
Thanks so much.
So, Chelsea, let's start with you. It's only been a month, but how soon will we start to get a handle on the fallout from sports betting, and how will that be measured?
Well, there's actually already research being done. So UMass has a group that we call Sigma. So they study, it stands for socioeconomic impact on gaming in Massachusetts. And they've already done some initial research, some baseline analysis on sports betting in the state of Massachusetts. So we already know that sports bettors, for example, in Massachusetts tend to be younger. They tend to be more highly educated. We also know that sports betting is not necessarily more risky than other types of gambling, but sports bettors tend to not just bet on sports, but also bet on other types of gambling, whether it's casino or lottery, and then that does create an enhanced risk. So it's something that's being measured and will continue to be measured.
So it's younger players, college educated or in college, or maybe just out of college. That's where the action is, right?
There's a higher group there than there is in other types of gambling, yes.
Well, Father, you have suggested that the Gaming Commission was caught flat-footed by this advertising onslaught that we've seen, and that it raises questions about their regulatory oversight. How could they not know what was going to happen?
Well, I mean, I doubt they thought the onslaught that was going to happen this frequently. But I think once they allowed the sports gambling to go online, that is what really made the difference, and that's also when the advertising. So when you listen to the tone of the advertising, it sounds as if the sports betting various firms, they're almost giving you away your first couple of bets and almost to entice you to get in. It's kind of like the old when you bought an inkjet printer. They gave you the printer for nothing, and then all of a sudden you had to pay for all the ink a lot. And so it's the same thing here. The come-ons from the sports betting, it's kind of interesting. And again, as your promo brought in here, it's who you even have. I mean, so you hear the sports personalities, the sports talk personalities. That's all they talk about.
Yeah, right in the middle of a game, they're parsing the odds. Chelsea, same question for you. Were you surprised when the floodgates opened by the nature of the flood?
I can't say I was surprised. It's something I've been following for quite some time. So when a new type of gambling is introduced, whether it's sports gambling or casino gambling, you're going to see an increased amount of advertising. But of course, I have two boys and we watch a lot of Red Sox. And so when you are looking at the Green Monster or you're looking at the pitcher's mound and you see sports betting advertising everywhere, it sometimes there's pause for concern. So how can we regulate it in a way that's responsible? How can we counterbalance some of the promotional advertising with responsible gambling messaging and promoting the problem gambling helpline?
Well, Father McGowan, I mean, we are not the first state to introduce smartphone betting and sportsbook wagering. And there are other states that have restricted the advertising much more than us, in some cases even banned it. Did the legislature fall asleep at the switch?
Well, remember, it's not the legislature, it's the Gaming Commission. It really, I mean, in other words, the legislature turned over to the Gaming Commission the responsibility to regulate gambling. Again, I doubt that the Gaming Commission ever thought that the amount of advertising was going to take place as they did, even the type of advertising. So I doubt that ever even came up to their minds. But it's interesting you mentioned this. The recent figures of sports gambling just came in for the state of Maryland. By the way, which started a month before. Only 3%. By the way, they made $800 million was spent on sports gambling in Maryland. Only 3% was done at a casino. So the vast majority, 97% of all the sports gambling is online. And that's another more interesting. How do you regulate, once you put something online like gambling, how do you regulate it? It's much more difficult.
Well, the group that Chelsea represents works very hard to address gambling addiction with creative educational programs. They do things like voluntary self-exclusion, where gamblers can set limits on their own wagering. But Chelsea, correct me if I'm wrong here, but your budget's just a few million bucks. Isn't this a mismatch with the resources of the multi-billion-dollar gambling industry?
Well, of course, more resources would always be helpful, and we're doing the best that we can. I would say that one of the good things that's happening, and I've sat through, days and days of hearings from the Gaming Commission about the regulations is that right now they're really passing temporary regulations. And you've already seen them start to put some safeguards and guardrails around the advertising. For example, you're not going to see the words risk-free betting in Massachusetts. Now they've gotten kind of clever on how they've gotten around that, but you're going to see things like that. They're requiring, responsible gambling messaging on, in lots of different ways. They have limit setting tools, and that's one of the really good things about online sports betting is you can set, wagering limits, deposit limits, time limits. Those are all really good things. In addition, they have voluntary self-exclusions and cooling off periods at the Mass Council. One of the things we're most proud of is over the last, probably it's now been over the last couple of years, we've developed a mechanism by which people can voluntarily self-exclude remotely. So if you want to self-exclude, you can simply call our number and then do that remotely, face-to-face with a live person, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. So that is great for somebody that doesn't want to walk into a sports book, wants to talk to a live person, might want to know about where to get resources like where their local Gambler Anonymous meeting is, et cetera, where if they want to get a clinician, whatever is most comfortable for that individual, we'll walk through all of the available resources that are local and specific to that person.
Well, just quickly, for someone who's hearing this and maybe wondering, gee, I might be able to use that, what is the number? Why don't you give that out?
The number we're really promoting right now is 1-800-GAMBLER, and we're doing that for a lot of reasons. We're moving in that direction because one of the issues is a lot of different states have different numbers, so that's the national number. So 1-800-GAMBLER. All
right. Well, Richard, I assume you share the utmost respect that I have for the work that the Mass Council does. It's extremely valuable work. But realistically, are the measures they're taking any match with the marketing guile, clout, and money of the gambling industry?
Well, I hear what you're saying, John, but unless somehow I would imagine, clearly not. But at the same time, I often wonder, with the gambling industry, eventually, they might end up being the next cigarette industry, where we'll ban certain kind of advertising and we'll put certain warning labels on things. I guess I'm bringing myself way back when I did a doctoral dissertation on the cigarette industry. It's interesting about what segment of society is actually being affected by this, and I think you might see a pushback a lot more than you right now you're thinking. I think there's going to be a pushback by certain segments because you are talking about more middle class people who are interested in this type of gambling.
Well, color me skeptical, with all due respect, because this has always been a state that loved gambling for many years. We were the #1 lottery spending state per capita, but when it comes to gambling literacy, Chelsea, you pointed out to one of our producers earlier today, we're far from #1. First of all, what is gambling literacy, and why is our lack of it a problem?
So there's something internationally in the research world called the positive play scale, and it's a way to measure gambling-related harm. And so we have done some of that analysis in the state of Massachusetts with Massachusetts bettors. And so it looks at belief subscales and behavior subscales, and one of the 4 main subscales is gambling literacy. And we know that Massachusetts bettors tend to score a little bit less on that. What it is knowing what you're actually doing when you play the game. So if you play blackjack, most people probably don't realize that depending on what table that you sit down at, the odds might be different. Similarly, when you wager on sports betting online, if you're making a money line bet versus a parlay bet, the house edge, or where the house advantage is significantly different between those two types of bets. So we want folks, and I think we share this in common with the operators, to be healthy players. We're gambling neutral, but we want people to make wise choices when it's coming to gambling and understand what they're doing, understand what the inherent risks are, set budgets, play responsibly, have a good time, but also know when to walk away.
Yeah, but Richard, it's the oldest cliche in the book that the house always wins. Everybody knows that. And we've had casino gambling for over a decade here, and the house continues to win big. I just wonder about without being too cynical here, about the limits of education to break through to the betting population.
Well, even more, the thing about sports gambling that could be a little bit insidious is that, especially if you get younger males, they think if they can do their homework, they can beat the odds. In other words, and I certainly saw that all the years when I taught at undergrads, they all thought that if, and of course the worst thing happened is when they won early, because then they really thought they could always beat the odds. But educating people, I think the odds, like blackjack, the casino games, but I think that's what's the more insidious thing about sports gambling, because it's probably, in a lot of people's minds, it's considered skill gambling. There's no luck there. If you really did your homework, you wouldn't lose. And of course, guess what? You will.
Well, we're just about out of time here, but I'd like you each to just take a few seconds to play the wishing game. If your fondest wish for something that could happen that would help you do your work were to be granted, Chelsea, what would it be? A bigger budget?
I'm going to have to take two wishes, if that's okay. Wish one, of course, a bigger budget, but wish two would be for there to be more data and research. So, and that takes collaboration between the regulators as well as the operators. So right now, there's a lot of self-regulation happening within the industry. So, a DraftKings might know about all their players and have a player profile, and they might actually know that some folks might be at risk. But with sports betting, a lot of sports bettors have registered on 2, 3, 4, 5 different apps. So really, you're not getting a whole picture of that individual person. So knowing more about the data, knowing more about cooling off periods and VSCs, what works, what doesn't, how can we refine it? What are ways that we can communicate better? While advertising the helpline is important, what other messages can we be getting out there that are going to resonate with people, young folks, old folks, et cetera? And then they're just really paying attention to young folks, that demographic under 30. We're starting to see things like, universities and colleges partnering with sports betting operators. And that is definitely pause for concern when you have a stadium full of folks here that aren't 21, et cetera. So thinking about that.
All right. Well, Father McGowan, I'm sorry she took all your time.
Sorry about that.
That's all right. Listen, thank you both for your insight. Really appreciate it.
All right. Take care. Thank you.
Take care. Thank you.
That's it for tonight, but come back tomorrow. Is AI the future of medical diagnosis? We'll hear from one doctor warning his colleagues to steer clear, and a researcher who's using the technology to help predict cancer cases. That and more tomorrow at 7. I'm Jon Keller from WBZ. Thanks for watching. Have a great night.